You ever hear the sound of your peace being shattered? For me, it was the crack of wood splintering before breakfast, a noise no man wants on a quiet morning. My ranch gate, the one I built with my own hands, groaned in protest as a shiny white SUV plowed through it like a wrecking ball. Behind the wheel? Karen. To her, my land wasn't private property. It was a shortcut, a stage where she played queen of suburbia. No wave, no permission. Just sunglasses on and arrogance in full view. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Litton HOA Stories for more shocking neighborhood battles like this one. The first time, I told myself it was a mistake. The second time, I figured she was testing me. By the third, I knew she was daring me, and let me tell you, I'm not the type of man who backs down on his own land. What Karen didn't realize was that while she was busy flexing her HOA crown, I was already planning a trap she'd never see coming. When I bought this ranch, I dreamed of wide-open skies, cattle at dawn, and the simple satisfaction of a wooden gate swinging shut every night. After 30 years and construction dust in my lungs, HOA committees barking about mailbox colors, I craved silence, freedom, a life without clipboards knocking at my door. My ranch sat just outside Pine Hollow, a subdivision run by an HOA with more rules than the state constitution. But here's the key. My deed wasn't under their rule. No dues, no oversight, no president to answer to. My gate was my line in the sand, and I was proud of it. I hadn't even been here a month when I met her. Karen, blonde bob, oversized shades, brand new SUV plastered with a HOA strong bumper sticker. She rolled her window halfway, gave me a smile colder than stone, and said, "Lovely place." Before I could answer, she hit the gas and rammed straight through my closed gate. Hinges screamed. Cedar scraped. Dust cloud rising like she owned the sunrise. My first thought, maybe she was lost. But the smug little wave she threw in her rear view said otherwise. That evening, I repaired the damage, resetting posts and reinforcing hinges. Told myself it was just bad manners. But of course, it happened again. And again. By the third time, she wasn't just trespassing, she was mocking me. And every splinter in that gate was starting to feel personal. Posts snapped, hinges bent like twigs, and fresh tire tracks carved across my pasture. Karen had upped the stakes. And this time, she wasn't alone. Within days, I saw 2 more HOA board members follow her lead, a maroon minivan flashing a Pine Hollow HOA proud decal, and a silver sedan with the P.HOA numbers follow her lead. A maroon minivan flashing a Pine Hollow HOA proud decal, and a silver sedan with the P.HOA treasurer's name on the plate frame. They rolled through my land like it had been gifted to them. This wasn't random. It was coordinated. Karen was turning my ranch into a community shortcut. Now, I could have let anger do the talking, but I tried reason again. Don't ask me why. One evening, I walked into the HOA office, a brick fortress that looked more like a law firm than a neighborhood hub. And there she was, seated behind a desk stacked with binders like trophies. She glanced up at me with a look of pure disdain, as if I was a farmhand tracking mud onto her marble floor. "We need to talk," I said flatly. "Oh, good," she replied sweetly. "You're here about your fines." "My what?" She slid a paper across the desk. "Violations against me. Unapproved structures, unkempt land, failure to comply with HOA easements." "The total?" "Just under $3,000. You've lost your mind," I shot back. "I'm not even in your HOA." Her tone sharpened, eyes glinting. "Don't play games. Every property here falls under our charter." "That's a lie, and you know it." "The county clerk confirmed I'm outside your boundary." Karen leaned back, tapping manicured nails against her chair armrest. Boundaries are flexible when community welfare is at stake. Boundaries, I snapped, are legal. And mine aren't flexible. Her lips tightened. You'll regret this. That was the moment I realized we weren't debating property lines, we were at war. And she wasn't coming alone. Later that week, while I was repairing fence posts, one of her cronies showed up. Wiry man, clipboard in hand, voice full of authority he didn't have. Sir, you can't keep rebuilding this gate, he declared. The HOA has voted. The road stays open. I wiped the sweat from my brow. Funny, I don't recall voting in your HOA because I'm not in it. He scribbled something, muttered about penalties, and stormed off with a threat. Karen will handle you, and handle me. She did. Around midnight, the crash of wood woke me like thunder. I stormed outside with a flashlight. My gate was demolished again, cedar splinters scattered across the gravel. In the distance, Karen's SUV taillights glowed as she tore off into the night. No excuses this time. Just pure defiance. By morning, whispers followed me through the general store. She's cutting through his land again. He won't win. She's got the sheriff on speed dial, the clerk in her pocket. That's when it hit me. I couldn't rely on law or reason. Karen believed she was untouchable. In her mind, the HOA was her kingdom, and she its queen. But me? I wasn't built to fold. 30 years of construction had taught me something. If a structure kept collapsing, you didn't patch it. You rebuilt it stronger. Sometimes you built with steel. As I gathered the shattered pieces of my gate, one thought took root, dangerous but firm. What if next time she didn't just break wood? What if she rammed into something she couldn't laugh off? That night I sat on my porch, eyes on the stars, pulse steady. Karen thought this was a game of fines and notices. But I wasn't playing anymore. Every rumble of her SUV now spiked my blood pressure. Every headlight glare felt like a personal insult. The next morning, I opened my mailbox to find another letter. Violation notice. Ranch entrance obstructs community traffic. Remove gate within 7 days or face daily fines of $250. I trembled with fury. I wasn't even in their HOA, yet they thought paper threats would break me. That afternoon, Karen herself marched up my porch, heels clacking like a gavel in her own courtroom. Clipboard in hand, she declared, "You've been warned. Take down that gate or the HOA will escalate legal action." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Karen, this isn't your land. This isn't your road. You don't get to make rules here. Her face flushed red. I am the president of Pine Hollow HOA. Every road in this community falls under my authority. Not this one, I cut in. My deed proves it, she faltered for a split second. But Karen never admitted defeat. She straightened her blazer, jabbed the paper toward me, and hissed, "You're a selfish man, denying neighbors access." "This road is a public benefit," I laughed, bitter and sharp. "A shortcut for your coffee runs, you mean? Don't dress it up as charity." Her eyes narrowed like venom. "You'll regret this." Then she spun on her heel and stormed off. The next week turned into a circus. HOA board members prowled my ranch with clipboards, snapping photos of my barn, my livestock, even my hay bales. "Documenting violations," one smirked. "Violations of what?" I demanded. He scribbled and walked off without an answer. That night, her SUV returned. She didn't slow at the gate. She plowed through what little I'd managed to rebuild. My dogs barked, my horses spooked, dust choking the air. And something inside me snapped. Irritation hardened into resolve. 3 nights later, the breaking point arrived. It was near midnight when tires screamed and wood split again. I grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, shotgun slung over my shoulder more for show than blood. By the time I reached the drive, the gate lay in ruins. But this time Karen hadn't come alone. 3 cars had barreled through, hers leading, 2 HOA vehicles tailing, their riders hooting like kids sneaking into a fair. Headlights cut through the pasture. I yelled until my throat burned, but they didn't slow. They were making a statement. This land belonged to them now. At dawn, I drove to the sheriff's office and complained. The deputy chewed a toothpick and shook his head. Without video, it's your word against theirs, he said. And Karen's got influence. She claimed you're blocking a community road. That was the end of that. No help. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles throbbed all the way home. If the law wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. The next evening I hammered the last hinge onto a makeshift gate when Karen showed up again. No words, no pleasantries. She stepped out of her SUV. You're wasting your time, she sneered. We'll keep driving through until that gate's gone. Accept it. Sweat slicked down my back. I straightened. This is my land. I'll defend it. Her smile was practiced and cold. We'll see. The board meets tomorrow. We're voting to remove your gate with or without your consent. I leaned in, slow and calm. You might have a board, Karen, but I've got a backbone and a plan. For a blink she hesitated, doubt or curiosity, then slid back into her SUV and left. That night at the kitchen table I sketched on scrap paper. Wood hadn't stopped her. Hinges hadn't worked. I needed something she couldn't bully aside with horsepower and arrogance. Steel, reinforcement, hidden defenses. The more I thought, the clearer it got. This was no longer a gate. It had to be a trap, a structure that wouldn't just halt her, it would humiliate her. I let out a low, dangerous chuckle. For weeks she'd treated my pasture like a racetrack. Soon she'd learn some gates don't just swing open, some bite. I rose before dawn the next day with a plan fixed in my bones. I wasn't a quitter. I was a builder. 30 years on construction sites taught me how to make things stand. If I could build a house to survive a storm, I could build a gate to survive Karen, but it wouldn't be a gate only. It would be a trap. I started with industrial steel, not the flimsy stuff from big box stores, but heavy beams I'd salvaged from a demolition job years back. They'd lain behind my barn collecting dust. Now they shone with purpose. For posts, I set 6-foot steel uprights into concrete footings packed with rebar cages. Each post would take thousands of pounds. I welded cross braces, angled supports, and hidden reinforcements until the frame read more fortress than fence. Then I clad it in thick cedar planks, so from the road it still looked like my old gate, rustic and familiar. But behind that veneer, it was a wall of steel. Stopping the SUV wasn't enough. I wanted the shortcut ended for good. I dug shallow trenches past the gate and installed tire-popping surprises. Hardened spikes set into concrete troughs, camouflaged beneath loose gravel. If someone tried to barrel through, the gate would hold and the spikes would shred tires like paper. It was a design born of frustration and honed with precision. Every cut, every weld, every measurement was exact. I worked by lantern light, sweat beading on my neck, my dogs sleeping at my feet like quiet sentries. Neighbors noticed. One or two slowed to ask, "You fixing that gate again?" I just grinned. "Upgrading," I said. Word got back to Karen. On the 3rd day I caught her parked beyond the property line, engine idling, phone likely recording. I kept working, sparks flying as I welded. She rolled down her window and sneered, "You really think you can stop progress?" I didn't look up. "No," I muttered, "but I can stop you." She spat gravel and drove off. My buddy Hank showed up that night. Weathered hands and a lifetime of fence mending, he eyed the work and rubbed his chin. "You playing with fire," he warned. I shrugged. "I know. Just don't let it burn you." He stayed to help. Together we tightened bolts, checked welds, and tested alignments until the gate felt immovable. When we stepped back, it looked like the old one, cedar and charm, but inside it was ironclad. By day 5 the trap was finished. Hinges glided on reinforced pins into steel brackets set deep in concrete. The trenches were hidden with a neat gravel cover. Spikes were invisible unless you knew where to look. Painted posts matched the cedar so the whole thing blended with the ranch's look. To an outsider, it was the same gate Karen had smashed a dozen times. To me, it was justice built to measure. That evening, as the sun bled crimson, I sat on the porch and stared at the gate. My hands ached and my back burned, but my jaw was steady. She'd treated me like a pushover. She'd thought fines and SUVs made her untouchable. She'd forgotten one simple truth. Every bully meets a wall he can't knock down. Tomorrow, when she roared through again, she'd learn how hard that wall could hit back. I leaned back in my chair, dogs at my feet, and whispered to the quiet evening air, "Come on, Karen, I'm ready." The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. And if there was one thing I'd learned about Karen, it was that patience wasn't one of her virtues. She couldn't resist proving herself. She had to win, had to show dominance. Sooner or later, she'd come barreling through my land again. It didn't take long. On a bright Saturday afternoon, the sound came. The low, throaty growl of her SUV rolling down the road louder and louder until the gravel trembled beneath her tires. I sat down my coffee cup on the porch rail, leaned back in my chair, and watched. There she was, perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, jaw set with that smug determination I'd come to know too well. Behind her followed 2 other vehicles, the HOA treasurer's maroon minivan and another board member's sedan, a convoy of arrogance. Karen didn't slow down, no Tony bit. She revved harder, speeding up as though the very act of smashing through my gate gave her power. I held my breath as her SUV closed the distance. Then it happened. The moment her bumper hit the gate, refused to budge. Instead of splintering like before, it stood unshaken, anchored into its steel core. The sound was like a gunshot metal against metal, the echo of finality. Her SUV jolted violently. Pfeffrin end crumpled with a sickening crunch. Airbags exploded. White smoke puffing out of the windows. Tires shrieked. Against gravel as momentum carried her forward another foot before the reinforced steel held her like a fly-caught in amber. And then came the spikes. As her rear tires skidded over the disguised trench, the steel teeth bit deep, ripping rubber apart with a sound that made me wheezy even from the porch. Pop, pop, pop. Within seconds, her sub sagged forward on shredded wheels, hissing like a wounded animal. The convoy behind her screeched to a how too late to save her. The minivan swerved into the ditch, fishtailing before stalling out. The sedan brake heard horn blaring, narrowly avoiding piling into her bumper. Dust settled over the scene, hanging in the summer air like smoke after a battlefield skirmish. For a long moment, everything was silent. Then the screaming began. Karen flung open her door, stumbling out in a cloud of airbag dust. She coughed, eyes wide, face twisted with fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked, pointing at me as though I just committed a crime against humanity. I stayed seated on Thepperch, calm as a preacher on Sunday morning. My dogs barked at her but stayed at my side, tail stiff with tension. "What I've done," I called back, "is stop you from trespassing." Her voice cracked into a shrill pitch. "This icillagal you've put live at risk." I stood slowly, walked down the steps, and approached the wreck. The closer I got, the clearer the picture her SUV's bumper bent like a crushed soda can. Airbags dripping fluids dripping onto Fegravol. It was a mess. But me, I smiled. "You were warned," I said evenly. "Over and over. You chose this." She stomped her heel into the ground, trembling with rage. "You're finished. The HOA will bury you in lawsuits." I raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? You drove through a private gate on private property without permission. That's trespassing. And lucky for me, I tapped my pocket, pulling out a small device. I installed cameras this time. I pointed to the posts. Sure enough, small security cams were mounted discreetly at angles, flashing red recording lights. Her face went pale beneath the dust and makeup. You wouldn't, she whispered. I would, I replied. By now, neighbors had gathered along the main road, drawn by the noise. Phones were out recording every second. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd as they saw Karen standing in front of her immobilized SUV, red-faced and sputtering. Looks like the Queen's lost her crown, one man muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter followed. The HOA treasurer crawled out of the minivan, limping slightly, his clipboard still clutched in his hand like a shield. He tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out with jeers. The sedan driver didn't even get out, just sat there, face buried in his palms. Karen spun around, glaring at the neighbors. Stop laughing. This is a serious violation, but the more she screamed, the more people laughed. The sight of Pine Hollow's self-proclaimed ruler, stranded, humiliated, and powerless, was too much for them to resist. And me, he just stood there, arms crossed, soaking it all in. The sheriff eventually arrived, lights flashing. He stepped out, surveying the scene with raised eyebrows. What in the blazes happened here? He asked. Karen ran to him like Akeld to a parent. He set a trap. He sabotaged the road. He could have killed us. The sheriff turned to me. That true? I shook my head. This isn't a public road. It's my private property. She's been trespassing for weeks. I reinforced my gate and installed cameras. You'll find everything you need in the footage. Karen Yaff dropped. You can't. Ma'am, the sheriff interrupted voice. Sharp. You've been warned before about pushing boundaries. If these cameras show what he says they do, you're the one in trouble. The crowd cheered. Phones held high. Karen's face went crimson, eyes darting from me to the sheriff to the neighbors, recording her downfall. For once, she was speechless. I walked up to her, SUV, tapped the hood, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. Shortcuts closed Karen. The crowd erupted in laughter whistles echoing down the road. Karen covered her face, screaming muffled curses before retreating back into her ruined SUV. The sheriff shook his head. We'll be in touch. But from the looks of it, you're in the clear. I nodded, watching as the tow trucks arrived to drag away her convoy of shame. And as the dust settled once more over Pine Hollow, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Because Karen had finally learned the hard way that not every gate can be broken. Some gates fight back. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that Karen never admitted defeat. Even with her SUV, crumpled her tires, shredded, and half the neighborhood laughing at her expense, she wasn't finished. No humiliation just made her more dangerous. The very next morning, I woke up to find another envelope in my mailbox. This one was thicker, heavier. Inside was a stack of papers stamped with official-looking seals. At the top, Notice of Legal Action. According to the document, the HOA was suing me for reckless endangerment, property damage, and willful obstruction of community easement. They demanded I not only remove my gate permanently, but also pay for the emotional distress suffered by Karen and her fellow board members. The cherry on top, they wanted me to cover the repair costs of her SUV. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Still, the audacity of it made my blood boil. Here, I was the victim of months of trespassing and vandalism, and somehow I was the one being painted as a criminal. I didn't waste time. I drove straight into town to see an attorney, a sharpie, woman named Martha, who'd been practicing property law longer than Karen had been harassing people. She leafed through the papers, shook her head, and smirked. "Classic HOA overreach," she said. "They don't have jurisdiction over your land, and they know it, but they're banking on you folding under pressure." "Well, folding isn't in my vocabulary," I replied. She chuckled. I leaned back in my chair, dogs sprawled at my feet, and murmured to the night, "Come on, Karen, try me." The trap was set. All I needed now was patience, and patience was not one of Karen's virtues. She loved proving she could win, proving she owned the place. It didn't take long. On a bright Saturday, the low, throaty growl of her SUV rolled down the road and built into a thunderous rumble across the gravel. I set my coffee on the porch rail, settled into my chair, and watched. There she was, hair immaculate, shades on, jaw set with that smug determination I'd come to despise. Behind her, the treasurer's maroon minivan and another bored sedan followed, a convoy of entitlement. She didn't slow. She revved and charged as if smashing my gate fueled her authority. I held my breath as the bumper met the gate, and the gate did not splinter. It held, anchored to its steel core. The impact rang like a gunshot, metal on metal, final, absolute. Her SUV jolted violently. The front crumpled with a sickening crunch. Airbags burst. White dust clouded the windows. The vehicle lurched forward another foot before the reinforced frame held it fast. Then the hidden spikes did their work. Her rear tires hit the disguised trench, and the steel teeth shredded rubber with a pop, pop, pop that made me wince even from the porch. Within seconds, her wheels collapsed into shredded ruin, the SUV sagging like something wounded. The convoy behind her screeched to a stop too late. The maroon minivan fishtailed into the ditch and stalled. The sedan slammed the horn, skidding to a near miss. Dust hung over the scene like smoke after a skirmish. Silence settled, brittle and raw. Then the screaming started. Karen threw her door open and stumbled out, coughing in a fog of airbag dust, eyes wild. "What did you do?" she screamed, pointing at me like I'd committed some atrocity. I stayed seated, calm as an old preacher. My dogs barked, but stayed put. "I stopped you from trespassing," I called back. Her voice pitched higher. "This is illegal. You could have hurt someone." I stood, walked down the steps, and inspected the wreck. Her bumper looked squeezed like a crushed soda can. Fluids wept onto the gravel. It was a wreck, but I couldn't help a small smile. "You were warned," I said evenly. Over and over, she stamped her heel, shaking with fury. "You're finished. The HOA will bury you in lawsuits." I arched an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" I asked. "You drove through a community access gate onto public right-of-way," she spat. "Trespass and endangerment." I reached into my pocket and tapped a small device. "I filmed you." I pointed to the posts where tiny security cameras sat, red lights blinking quietly. Her face drained beneath the dust and makeup. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would," I said. Neighbors had gathered by then, phones raised, recording. A few chuckles rippled through as they took in Karen, red-faced, sputtering, stranded. "Looks like the queen lost her crown," someone muttered, and laughter spread. The treasurer crawled out of his minivan, rubbing a bruised knee, clutching his clipboard like a talisman. He tried to speak. The crowd drowned him in jeers. The sedan's driver stayed inside, head in his hands. Karen spun on the neighbors. "Stop laughing. This is serious." But the more she screamed, the louder the laughter grew. Seeing Pine Hollow's self-appointed ruler humiliated was too delicious to ignore. I stood arms folded, taking it all in. The sheriff arrived with lights strobed, stepping out and surveying the wreck with a raised brow. "What in blazes happened here?" he asked. Karen ran up like a child to her protector. "He set a trap," she wailed. "He sabotaged the road." He could have killed us." The sheriff turned to me. "Is that true?" I shook my head. "This is private property. She's been trespassing for weeks." I reinforced the gate and put cameras up. He listened, then said sharp, "Ma'am, you've been warned about pushing boundaries." "If the footage backs him up, you're in the wrong." The crowd cheered. Phones lifted higher. Karen's face flushed crimson as she looked from me to the sheriff to the watching neighbors, all recording her fall. For the first time, she was speechless. I walked up to her hood, tapped it, and announced loud enough for everyone, "Shortcuts closed. Karen." Laughter and whistles rolled down the road. She covered her face, cursing through muffled sobs before retreating back into the wrecked SUV. Tow trucks came, hooking up the convoy of shame, hauling it away as dust settled over Pine Hollow. A quiet came that felt like peace. Karen had finally learned not every gate was hers to break. Some gates fight back. But that peace was brittle. She didn't fold gracefully. Humiliation stoked her anger, and anger makes people dangerous. The very next morning, my mailbox held another envelope, thicker, heavier. Inside were pages stamped with official seals, a notice of legal action. According to the papers, the HOA was suing me for reckless endangerment, property damage, and obstruction of a community easement. They demanded I remove the gate, pay for Karen's emotional distress, and cover her vehicle repairs. The audacity made my blood boil. I'd endured months of trespass and vandalism, and suddenly I was the criminal. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight into town to see Martha, a sharp-eyed property lawyer who'd been handling cases longer than Karen had been running her schemes. She flipped through the documents, smirked, and said, "Classic HOA overreach. They don't have jurisdiction, but they bank on scaring you into folding. Folding wasn't in my vocabulary." She laughed softly, then looked up. "We'll handle this. If you love watching arrogant HOA bullies finally get what they deserve, stick around because this one's straight out of a movie. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Litton HOA Stories so you never miss the next showdown." "Good," I told Martha, "because this is going to be fun." Within the week, she filed a countersuit trespassing, property destruction, harassment, and even attempted fraud through fake fines. Thanks to the cameras, we had every second on tape. Karen ramming the gate, her board members tailgating, and the wreckage of their little crusade. When Karen realized I wasn't caving, she escalated. 2 days later, I came home to find HOA board members outside my gate with clipboards, shouting loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This man is dangerous." One cried. "He set a trap that could have killed children." Karen stood at the center like a general, waving papers in the air. "We cannot let one stubborn man endanger our community. He will pay." But unlike before, the neighbors didn't rally. They whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others recording on their phones. The tide was shifting. I stepped onto my porch, arms folded, and called out, "You want the truth? Watch the footage." Every fake fine, every trespass, every time she plowed through that gate, it's all on camera. This isn't about safety. It's about control. The murmurs turned to shouts. "We're tired of the HOA bullying us." One man yelled. Another added, "You tell him, neighbor." Karen's face drained, but she screamed back, "Lies. All lies." Her kingdom was crumbling. Court was where it truly collapsed. Karen strutted in wearing a bright red suit, binders stacked in her arms, her board trailing like ducklings. Her lawyer painted me as some paranoid recluse with the death trap of a gate. But Martha? Calm, precise, lethal. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will prove my client's land lies outside HOA jurisdiction. Every fine is fraudulent. And the only danger here was caused by the reckless trespassing of the HOA president. She clicked a remote, and the courtroom screens lit up with footage. Karen's SUV smashing the gate, tires bursting, neighbors laughing. More clips rolled, every reckless charge, every arrogant smirk. By the end, even the judge looked unimpressed. When Karen testified, she lost it. "I am the president," she screamed, pointing at me. "He can't defy me. He can't defy the HOA." The judge slammed his gavel. "This is a court of law, not your board meeting. Sit down." Her credibility shattered. The ruling hit like a hammer. The HOA's claims dismissed. Instead, they were ordered to pay damages for trespassing and destruction of property. Karen herself was fined for harassment and reckless driving. The footage was admitted into public record and leaked. Within days, her SUV crash went viral. The internet roasted her with memes. HOA Karen versus the Gate of Justice. One clip froze on her shocked face with the caption, "You shall not pass." Back in Pine Hollow, neighbors finally spoke up. Stories of Karen's bullying poured out, fake fines, intimidation, threats. Board members quit one by one. The HOA's reputation collapsed, its funds drained, and Karen was left isolated, her power gone. Me? I sat on my porch with coffee, the sun setting behind my reinforced gate. For the first time in weeks, the air felt quiet, clean, peaceful. But I knew Karen. Silence wasn't surrender. It was regrouping. Weeks passed, and she slunk through town with her head low. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered with scorn. I thought she'd finally broken until a certified letter arrived. A settlement offer. She wanted me to remove my gate, allow limited community passage, and heal divisions. I laughed out loud. Heal divisions? After everything, it was just another attempt to claw back control. So I wrote her a single-page reply. There is no community easement. I own the road, and I have the deed to prove it. See, here's the twist. While Karen screamed about community rights, I quietly dug through county records. Not only was my ranch outside HOA jurisdiction, the road itself wasn't public. It was mine, deed and all. Every fine, every lawsuit, every threat crumbled with that single document. I'd held that knowledge like a loaded gun, waiting for the right time. When Karen read my response, she stormed onto my property one last time, waving the letter. "This is fraud. You can't own that road, it's for the community." I stood on my porch, arms resting on the rail. "Check the records, Karen. County Clerk's Office. Deeds in my name. Always has been." Her face twisted, eyes wide with disbelief. She sputtered like an engine running on fumes. That's impossible." "No," I said firmly. "What's impossible is you ever setting foot on this road again. Consider yourself trespassed." Neighbors had gathered again, phones raised, capturing every word. And when Karen realized she was outnumbered, outrecorded, and stripped of power, something inside her cracked. She let out a strangled scream, stomped her heel into the dirt, then stormed off for the last time. From that day forward, she never crossed my gate again. The HOA, robbed of its tyrant leader, shrank into silence. Its remaining members kept busy trimming hedges instead of harassing ranchers. My ranch finally became the sanctuary I'd envisioned. The gate stood tall, stronger than ever, guarding not just my land, but my dignity. Every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd done it the right way. I hadn't stooped to Karen's intimidation and lies. I built something unbreakable, stood firm, and let the truth do the rest. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sheriffs or judges. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a gate, one that refuses to fall no matter how many times arrogance tries to ram it down. And for me, that was the sweetest victory of all. Looking back, I realized this story wasn't just about a gate or an SUV or even a woman named Karen. it was about boundaries and the courage it takes to defend them. Life will always have people who think rules don't apply, who laugh at your warnings, who push until you either break or build stronger. I chose to build. That's the lesson I want to leave with you. In life, your gate might not be made of wood and steel. It might be your time, your energy, your dignity, or your peace of mind. But whatever it is, don't let anyone trample through it just because they think they can. Set your boundaries. Reinforce them. And when someone refuses to respect them, don't back down. Respect isn't given, it's earned. Sometimes you have to demand it, so let me ask you, what's the gate in your life that you're protecting? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button to Litton HOA Stories. Because trust me, this isn't the last HOA battle we're going to expose.